When a billionaire discovered his maid hidden on the street, he took an amazing action that transformed. David Turner coasted through the polished streets of Silicon Valley, the hum of his sleek electric car the only sound in his otherwise silent world. As skyscrapers framed his view, a vague restlessness nagged at the edges of his mind. Could wealth really offer him happiness? He clicked the navigation, but for an unexplained reason, his finger hovered over the screen. A sudden impulse had him veering off the main road onto an old side street, where shimmering glass and steel transformations faded into crumbling pavement. It was there that he saw her, Maria. Once a vibrant source of warmth in his extravagant home, she sat hunched beneath the gloomy overpass, the sun's light a cruel reminder of her diminished reality, a far cry from the laughter shared over family dinners with his kids who had adored her. David's heart jolted, the manicured facade of his success now reopening old wounds. How could he have let it come to this? Guilt coiled around him like a serpent, constricting his chest. How could he have prioritized profits over people, stacking wealth while neglecting the ones who had contributed to his rise? He approached slowly, each step feeling heavier than the last, recalling Maria's steadfast commitment, her dream of becoming a chef. The memories crashed over him like waves, pushing him toward a reckoning he wasn't prepared for. The disparity of their lives screamed in silence. Here she was, living on the streets, while he was a billionaire, comfortably cloaked in privilege he had gained at the expense of others. Was there any satisfaction in living a life insulated from the suffering of those who had sacrificed for him? "Maria," he said, the word barely escaping his lips as he hesitated, trembling at the thought of what this encounter would demand from him. To confront her not just as a former employee, but as a fellow human, a responsibility he had long neglected. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As he offered her a place to stay, unexpected anger sparked within him. This wasn't charity, this was an accountability he had long sidestepped. They began talking. Maria shared how dreams turned into ashes, recounting her struggles, her love for culinary creation dimmed to survival alone. With each revelation, discomfort festered in David. His insights pierced deeper into his conscience. Was it possible to shift focus from personal gain to public responsibility? The questions haunted him, taunting him with the notion of flipping his narrative. What if he could bridge the chasm of inequality he once ignorantly ignored? But as he envisioned a way to make an impactful change, launching a program to uplift those ignored by society, a surge of doubt recoiled deep within. Would his elite peers reject him for even considering this path? Fear wrapped around his thoughts like vines strangling a tree. Would he risk ruining his hard-earned legacy? Their whispers echoed through his mind, those who derided such dreams as impractical and messy. As he laid bare his ideas to his well-heeled colleagues, the chill of skepticism washed over him, paralyzing in its breadth. Was he indeed venturing too far out of his lane? A murmur of breathlessness filled the air as he considered the magnitude of his proposal. Thus, in that moment, tangled in uncertainty, aligned against societal expectations, he paused, unable to summon the courage to commit fully. Knowing Maria stood beside him, he could feel her gaze encouraging him to explore uncharted territories of responsibility. Could he truly invest his heart into the lives of those he had unknowingly sidelined? Anticipation hung thick within the confined space, stretching into silence. Would he shatter the illusions of his world to create a new one? Or would he retreat back to the safe embrace of comfort, abandoning those who desperately needed his voice? The answers lingered unformed, waiting with an unsettling stillness, potent and laden with the weight of destiny. The moment hung heavily in the air, and David found himself grappling with the weight of his choices. Each breath seemed to echo the uncertainty coursing through him, a juxtaposition to the opulence he once chased without thought. Did he truly want to venture down a path that could fracture the very identity he'd built? Voices in his head churned like a storm, urging him to rethink the life of luxury that fettered his soul to societal norms. With his employees around the boardroom table, David's vision felt raw and almost unrefined. The energy of his proposal, an initiative to uplift those who had fallen through the cracks of a system that favored his kind, surged against a tide of doubt. Would they see the value in his revelation? Or would he face the harsh reality of betrayal from those he once considered allies? "David, what's your endgame here?" one voice, Marcus, asked, cutting through the tension. "Are we really looking to hand out charity to those who didn't make it? It's inefficient business, not to mention risky." The words sliced through him, igniting his instincts to defend his aspirations. They were right, it was risky, but wasn't anything worthwhile worth a little risk? He felt the gnawing sense of purpose battling with insecurity. "What if we created a kitchen incubator?" he countered, his voice gaining confidence. "Teach those living on the margins to harness their culinary skills, provide a pathway into the industry." As murmurs of skepticism swirled, a flicker of defiance ignited in him. He envisioned Maria, her passion, her wishes, frayed but not extinguished. Her story could illuminate the experiences of many more. We can't continue to give in to the status quo. We need to adapt and redefine what success means. He noted the reluctant nods around him, an indication of interest, but the resistance still pulsed in the room. David felt the urgency accelerate in his veins. The contrast of those who possessed comfort versus those relegated to the depths of despair flashed in his mind, provoking an intense call to action. They were not mere statistics, they were individuals worthy of belief. After the meeting, David walked to his office in a contemplative daze, heavy with the weight of the conversation. The polished floors seemed indifferent to his turmoil. A nameplate sat on his desk, his title engraved, CEO. But in that moment, he questioned if such a label defined him. Did belonging to a world of wealth and privilege make him more capable? Or had it rendered him blind to the realities that surrounded him? He stared out of the window, observing the city, while reflecting on recently uncovered desires, to innovate and contribute to something significant, something beyond himself. This wasn't just about Maria, it was about reframing his legacy. What could emerge from vulnerability, from aligning his corporate success with ethical responsibility? David reached for his phone, his fingers trembling with purpose as he drafted an email to potential partners in the culinary world, inviting them to collaborate, innovate, and rethink an industry that often glossed over talent simply due to circumstances of birth. This was only the beginning of a greater conversation he intended to ignite. But just as he was piecing the dream together, a chilling thought gripped him. What if he failed? Would his peers view this crusade as weakness? How far was he willing to go to challenge the culture that had sustained his success? Each step felt monumental. The fabric of his ambition was unraveling into something he couldn't control. As he pressed send on the email, uncertainty gripped him. He realized he had crossed a threshold from which there would be no return. He could no longer creep along the edges of compassion. This was his moment to confront discomfort head-on. What awaited him, acceptance or condemnation, remained veiled in shadow. David's phone buzzed almost immediately. It was a message from an unexpected source. Could this turn of events fortify his resolve or challenge the very foundation of what he sought to achieve? An invitation to discuss his proposal further, but at what cost? The answer loomed ahead, demanding to be confronted. David's heart raced as he read the text on his phone, each word a magnet pulling him into a decision point. The invitation was from an influential chef, a titan of the culinary scene, known for both his accolades and his fierce commitment to social justice. The chef's reputation for philanthropy lent a veneer of legitimacy to David's ambitions. However, the implications of this meeting echoed louder than the initial excitement bubbling inside him. Would this chef support him, or would he become yet another voice urging David to abandon his quest, dismissing it as folly? His fingers hovered above the screen as he considered his response. The temptation to accept was strong, but so was the voice of caution. What if this industry titan perceived his proposal as a publicity stunt, another wealthy man seeking to assuage guilt through hollow gestures? A wave of indignation welled up. No, this was not a fleeting whim. David intended to carve out a space in this world to amplify voices systemically muted. With newfound determination, he typed a simple yet firm acceptance to the chef's invitation, affirming his commitment to the cause. In the days leading to the meeting, David meticulously prepared. He immersed himself in research about culinary incubators, studying successful models and their impacts. He sought out stories of individuals who had turned culinary skills into life-changing opportunities. Each tale resonated with him deeper than the last, amplifying his resolve. At night, as he lay awake, David often reflected on Maria, the indomitable spirit who had catalyzed his transformation. He envisioned her thriving, not just surviving. This underpinning fueled his efforts and rendered his hesitations increasingly intolerable. He understood now that any potential backlash didn't stem from weakness, but rather from a reluctance to bare his soul to critics who'd eagerly pounce on perceived failures. The day of the meeting arrived, and David found himself standing outside a chic restaurant, its exterior a glistening facade of ambition. The aroma of gourmet dishes wafted through the air, a stark contrast to the hunger he felt inside, an insatiable desire for authenticity and connection. He stepped inside, heart pounding and mind racing, aware that he was moments away from confronting the divide between privilege and the struggles of those he wanted to uplift. Seated at a small, intimate table, David scanned the lavish space, taking note of the patrons lost in their own worlds, blissfully unaware of the stories unfolding just outside the doors. His gaze finally settled on the chef as he approached, a man of robust stature, adorned in a simple yet elegant apron, exuding both warmth and an intimidating presence. David, the chef greeted, offering a firm handshake that sent electric pulses of validation coursing through him. "I've read your proposal, and I must admit I have some reservations." The words felt like a sandbag settling on his chest, but David replied with resolve, "I expected as much. I know it sounds unconventional, but I truly believe in creating pathways, not charity." The chef studied him, eyes narrowing as if weighing David's every word. "Tell me, what do you think these people really need? Is it a kitchen, or is it a chance to feel valued?" David's throat tightened, struck by the insight embedded in the question. With each answer, the weight of discomfort transformed into clarity. It's both and more. It's about equipping them while also breaking the stereotypes that reduce human beings to mere numbers. As the conversation deepened, a spark ignited within David. Each exchange became a raw exploration of ambition tethered to vulnerability. He recounted stories of the marginalized culinary visionaries he had met, and the chef intently listened, nodding as he interjected with his own experiences. That shared space morphed into a profound bond. It felt as if they were charting uncharted territory together. Still, an undercurrent of tension coursed through David. Would the chef choose to support him when faced with the inevitable pushback from traditionalists? As the discussion waned into focus, the moment arrived when they had a chance to outline the next steps, yet David hesitated. Did he dare to vocalize his hopes for transformative change, or would his words simply fall flat against the polished veneer of the culinary elite? In that moment, David realized that this conversation was a litmus test, not just for the viability of his project, but for his own evolution. What was he truly willing to risk? The clock ticked louder as the chef awaited his reply, eyes searching for conviction. Would David step fully into this challenge, or would he recoil, retreating to safety? The weight of the moment grew heavier, laying bare the truth. If he faltered now, everything, his burgeoning vision, his identity, could unravel. And perhaps most importantly, would he seize this chance, or would it slip through his fingers like everything else he had ever taken for granted? David inhaled sharply, locked in a moment that felt suspended in time. The chef's gaze, sharp and discerning, demanded something more than a casual response. It called for a promise, a commitment that would not only define this meeting, but his journey ahead. "I believe they need a space to nurture their creativity," David said, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. "A culinary sanctuary where their identities are celebrated, not shunned." The chef leaned in, intrigued. "Sanctuary? That's a strong word. How do you plan to make that happen?" A surge of adrenaline coursed through David as he sensed the shift. He was no longer just a hopeful idealist. He was becoming an advocate, a force for change. The chef's brow creased in contemplation. David's heart raced, pushing him forward. "I've seen too many talented chefs working in the shadows, their potential stifled by circumstances. I could list hundreds of names who just needed chance to shine." David paused, the weight of his realizations settling over him. "My work isn't solely about food. It's about empowering real lives." David watched as the chef processed his words, the flicker of something, interest or doubt, playing across his features. "But this is not just about the kitchen. What if I invest in your idea? What will you do if the critics come for you? They will, you know." The question hung between them like a tension-filled thread. David had anticipated this moment, yet the prospect of facing criticism still clawed at him. Would the weight of the haters and their conventional perspectives crush him? Did he have the resilience to stand firm? "I'll welcome them," he replied, his voice firming. "Constructive criticism is always valuable. What's deadly is silence and apathy." The chef nodded, a glimmer of approval brightening his eyes. "That's the spirit. So, what happens next?" Driven by his vision, David detailed a preliminary outline for the incubator. He spoke passionately about workshops, mentorship, and a collaborative community that celebrated diversity. With every syllable, he wove a tapestry of purpose, and for the first time, it felt tangible. As they wrapped up the meeting, the chef surprised David by saying, "I'd like to see you present this concept to my advisory board." The weight of those words resonated deeply within him. This was not merely an endorsement. It was an invitation into a realm that had previously seemed impenetrable. Leaving the restaurant, David felt a shift within, a forging of steel from anxiety to purpose. He understood just how steep the climb would be as he faced a board that might be as skeptical as the initial critics. But with every ounce of courage he summoned, David sensed his vision could become a reality. However, the exhilarating relief of getting this far was abruptly tempered with a gnawing worry. There was a vast world of skeptical opinions beyond the supportive confines of the chef. His thoughts spiraled into the faces of those who had been overlooked, people whose tenacity had never received its due. Would they trust him to summon the fight for them that he promised? What if he failed them now, when they needed someone in their corner? A commitment to battle against that silence pulsed through him, yet the specter of doubt loomed larger. A new challenge lay ahead, and David stood on the precipice of an opportunity that could catapult his dreams into reality or shatter them. In that moment of reflection, he realized that forging connections was only the beginning. The real test would come when he faced the well-heeled establishment that thrived on tradition. As he approached his car, his phone buzzed, a text from the chef, simple yet laden with gravity. Don't lose sight of your why. The words struck him like a cold wave, awakening a new urgency. Now, more than ever, he had to be ready to defend his purpose. The time had come to face the coming storm, and he felt the stirrings of fear twisting in his gut. In a world rife with resistance, how could he maintain his resolve? Would he find the strength to uplift others, or would he be swept away in a tide of opposition? He glanced at the looming skyline, a maze of possibilities stretching before him. The real question lingered. Was he truly prepared to fight for what he believed in? As he drove away, his mind raced with plans and tactics, the critical board meeting edging closer, and a realization slowly dawned. This was not just about securing a financial backing. It was a defining battle for his own conviction. David spent the weekend in a whirlwind of preparation, pacing through his small apartment, notes strewn about like fallen leaves in autumn. Each page held ideas, charts, visions, yet the pressure gnawed at him. With each passing minute, the meeting time drew nearer, amplifying the anxiety lodged in his chest. Was he truly ready to articulate his vision to people who had spent careers entrenched in culinary orthodoxy? He plopped onto his cramped couch, eyes scanning the papers he had meticulously crafted. Yet doubt crept in, uninvited. Would the board care for his dream of a sanctuary? Would they dismiss him as an idealist, a nuisance who threatened their traditional way of doing things? The specter of career-ending criticism loomed, hovering silently, making it hard to breathe. As he stared out the window, the bustling world outside contrasted starkly with his internal chaos. People moved with purpose, cars navigated with determination. It struck him then, he had to embody that very determination. Drawing a deep breath, David grabbed a pen and began to jot down his why, the vision that had sparked this audacious endeavor. He noted not just what he wanted to achieve, but why these chefs' stories mattered. He recalled a former line cook at a diner, a single mother who slaved long hours, yet created the most enchanting pastries during her brief moments of inspiration. He thought of the busboy with dreams of grandeur, all mired in poverty. These stories fueled his passion, the glimpses of potential too often overlooked. He stood up, energized by newfound clarity. Each story, each person he fought for would be a cornerstone of his presentation. It was time to weave those narratives into a powerful mosaic that could resonate with a board known for their stringent requirements. If he could anchor their attention with the raw essence of these individuals, maybe he could ignite a fire of understanding. The day of the meeting arrived, and David stood before a polished boardroom table, framed by austere, scrutinizing faces of seasoned investors and chefs. The tension crackled in the air as he laid out his aesthetic visuals and bar charts. But visuals alone would not convey his heart. As he began to speak, he sensed the walls of skepticism creeping around him. "Imagine," he started, his voice steadier than he felt, "a kitchen where creativity flourishes, where we cultivate not just chefs, but stories that breathe life into every dish." He shared the narratives of the single mother, the young dreamer, all while reading the shifting expressions on the board's faces. Tentative interest sparked in some eyes, while others seemed unconvinced. Yet he pushed forward, undeterred. Let's break the mold of conformity together and create a paradigm shift. We're not just investing in a culinary program. We're investing in humanity's shared stories. As David spoke, he felt barriers cracking. The openness of vulnerability had touched a nerve, and a few board members leaned in, their brows furrowing in deeper thought. He had ignited a glimmer of potential, a flicker of humanity nestled within the rigid, polished surfaces of the boardroom. But then a voice, harsh and skeptical, cut through the warming energy. And what happens when the critics descend upon you? What will you do then? The chair's owner, a notable figure in culinary elitism, looked down his nose at David. The question formed a palpable noose around his resolve. Would he let fear falter his growth? Strong emotions clashed within him, fueling the fire of conviction. He straightened his back, meeting the gaze of the chair with unwavering determination. I will embrace them. Critique offers an opportunity for growth and refinement. But let's also ask, who truly benefits from a perfect facade when lives are at stake? For a moment, silence enveloped the room as the board members processed his words. The meeting's atmosphere shifted, a dynamic tug-of-war of establishment versus innovation swirling in the air. As the session continued and he engaged in fierce debates, David felt a surge of something new, potent resilience. No longer merely a voice in the wilderness, he was now establishing himself as a defender of emerging talent, worthy of standing ground against the tide of complacency. Yet, as the meeting concluded, David left with unsettled thoughts. Had he truly made the impact he sought? Would it translate into action? The confident swell was quickly overshadowed by the question that loomed. What if this hard-fought opportunity vanished into thin air, lost to a system resistant to change? He couldn't shake that feeling as he drove home. The elements of doubt wrestled with shards of hope. Was this confrontation merely a precursor to greater challenges? Would he be able to galvanize support rather than retreat under scrutiny? As the city lights flickered through his windshield, a realization dawned. He must prepare for the adversities, because the hardest battles often brought the sweetest victories. Tomorrow, he would confront the inevitable question of how far he was willing to go to defend his vision. A moment of reckoning was near, and anticipation brewed within him. Would he crumble under pressure, or solidify his stance and rise as a champion for those he aimed to uplift? The morning arrived with a brooding sky, mirroring David's tumultuous thoughts. He stood before the mirror, rehearsing his thoughts, each word a lifeline he hoped would guide him through the unforgiving waters of his next presentation. The initial meeting served as both an unsettling juncture and a catalyst for transformation within him. It was a critical moment in which he would either solidify his purpose or drown beneath the weight of others' doubts. As he navigated the streets to the office, the brisk autumn air didn't stimulate him, it chilled him. The stark contrasts of daily life, joggers racing past cars stuck in traffic, their exertion evident against automotive inertia, exacerbated his own internal conflict. David felt the mounting pressure pressing against his chest. Was he prepared to confront the naysayers head-on, to advocate for a philosophy that was so fundamentally at odds with the culinary tradition they revered? Walking into the boardroom, David could sense an undercurrent of tension. The elite members of the board, seated with their polished composure, seemed to scrutinize him through narrowed eyes. Yet this time there was an unsettling shift. Their attention had been piqued, but would it be enough? Would they engage beyond superficiality? "Thank you for coming in today," the chairperson began, his tone careful but nonchalant. "We have a few follow-up questions and feedback on your proposal." David's heart pounded as he settled into his seat, preparing to defend his position. Yet deep down simmered a new resolve. One board member, an experienced chef with a legacy of awards, leaned forward, his brow furrowing as he spoke. "You mention embracing critiques as a pathway to growth. Can you clarify how you plan to sustain innovation without sacrificing quality? Your approach feels risky." David took a moment, formulating a response that would not only address the question, but solidify his vision in the minds of skeptics surrounding him. Risk is inherent in creativity. It's what fuels innovation. Quality will not be sacrificed. Rather, it will evolve. Just as flavors can transform a dish, so can ideas shape our industry. Each word dripped with conviction as he drew on the strength birthed from his personal struggles. This was not just a business idea, it was a crusade towards something greater. The conversation wove through objections and defenses, with David feeling his footing strengthen with every exchange. It was crucial not to shy away from the stringent standards they wanted to maintain. Yet, he understood that to truly disrupt and enhance the system was to emphasize the richness of individual narratives over relentless perfection. Can you manage this level of disruption without the right resources? A chilly voice from a director retorted, a smirk creeping in. David's mind raced briefly before he latched on to a burgeoning idea. If we focus solely on resources, we risk losing sight of the heart of our work. What if we instead empower wandering hearts, feeding their spirits before their stomachs? This was a moment of truth, a departure from simply defending himself. He shifted from the defensive to a hypothetical realm where he illustrated how emerging talent bent the rigid constraints they operated within. What if together we become that firmament, an incubator not just of culinary excellence, but narratives that redefine culinary art? As he spoke, he could see the board members' reactions evolve. Curiosity replaced skepticism in a few faces, some even exchanging glances with intrigue. It wasn't just a presentation anymore. It had become a dialogue, and his vulnerability was now a bridge to understanding. But as David continued to elaborate, a lingering voice from the back remained resolutely unconvinced, raising a concern that cut deep. Sounds romantic, David, but where's the accountability? The eyes in the room turned expectantly to him again, waiting for clarity in the face of this palpable challenge. A new urgency bolted through him. This wasn't just about dreams. It was also about crafting a practical route toward nurturing an innovative culture. The stakes were now higher, the onus resting more firmly on his shoulders. Accountability comes in the form of mentorship and evaluations, David replied, his mind racing to construct a compelling framework. We'll implement structured assessments of growth alongside consistent feedback loops. We focus on nurturing both creativity and professionalism. He knew he was playing a tightrope act. There was still that thread of doubt weaving its way into his confidence. What if this was not the right path? What if their expectations resetting the limits of culinary talent proved impossible? As the discussions continued, David found himself wrestling with a mixture of enthusiasm for the potential change and fear of scrutiny, the very forces he wished to overcome. Oscillating between hope and trepidation, he felt the weight of the responsibility growing. As the meeting drew to a close, questions remained swirling in the atmosphere. Would his fervor be strong enough to tether them to this vision? Would his proposals grant him the forward momentum he desperately sought? In the wake of their discussions, he departed, heart racing, but a novel vigor blossoming within him. Perhaps it was time to reach deeper, elevate his game further. Tomorrow could hold not just debates, but decisive actions. Would he claim his space among them, turning resistance into opportunity? The following day would require bold moves, bringing forth the passion and potential bubbling just beneath the surface. The journey of manifestation was fraught, yet it beckoned. What lay ahead? Would it be a fortuitous opening, or would the shadows of doubt eclipse him again? The following morning, the sun broke through the clouds in slanted rays, illuminating the office with a newfound brightness. David stood at his desk, his fingers hovering above the keyboard as he prepared to draft an expansive strategy. No longer was he just reacting. Today, he would take the initiative and build something that aligned with his vision. Real transformation required action, and he felt ready to conquer the day's uncertainties. His mind buzzed with ideas as he typed. Each keystroke echoed his desire to unravel the possibilities of combining personal narratives with culinary innovation. Deep down, he sensed that the discussion from the previous day had sparked something within the board members, an opportunity to co-create rather than merely evaluate his thoughts. It was a ghostly reminder of how collaboration could enrich ideas when collective talents fused. As he paced the room, contemplating his proposal's nuances, a knock interrupted his thoughts. Samantha, the newly appointed young chef on his team, entered hesitantly, yet with an air of curiosity. "Hey, David, I heard about your presentation. It sounds like you've got a real vision brewing." David appreciated her enthusiasm, but he noticed a tinge of apprehension in her voice. "It's still untested waters for us, Samantha. Any vision requires fortitude, and yesterday was just a taste of what lies ahead." Here lay a chance not just to mentor, but also to engage her input into the project. "I've been thinking about the narratives you want to weave into our culinary approach," she said, observing his expressions closely. "What if we showcased stories of local farmers and their unique produce in our menus? Each dish could tell a story, connecting diners not just with flavors, but with the sources of their food. It could drive home the importance of supporting the community, too." David paused, intrigued by her suggestion. A feeling of exhilaration washed over him, the spark of a collaborative drive invigorating his vision. "That's brilliant, Samantha. It embodies what I've been striving to advocate. If we can tap into those human connections, we can break away from standard care. It's about harnessing the rich tapestry of experiences behind each ingredient." Encouraged by the exchange, he outlined a plan for the upcoming board meeting, a more comprehensive collaboration model that invited input from different team members, not just chefs, but also farmers and local suppliers. He felt a rush of warmth toward Samantha. It was as if her contributions were nudging him toward a more accountable, community-centered approach. However, as he fleshed out the project, the voice of doubt began whispering in the recesses of his mind. What if this meeting led to nothing? What if personal narratives added complication rather than clarity? The specter of resistance loomed. David was conscious of the tension between innovation and tradition. Was he pushing too far? He quickly shook off the unease. Scrutinizing queries and skeptical voices had become parts of his journey, but he refused to let them pull him under. This was his moment to stake his claim in the industry while cultivating a human-centered approach. He envisioned a dynamic where connections were nurtured, elevating not just dishes but also the souls behind them. Later that day, he called for an impromptu team meeting, gathering his colleagues to share the rejuvenated proposal. A palpable energy filled the room as ideas spooled through the air like threads in a loom. They were a motley crew of seasoned chefs and eager newcomers, working together to give flesh to David's vision. As he watched each person engage, the bond formed amongst them felt invigorating. "Let's create an environment where everyone feels ownership of this project," he urged. "For us to redefine our approach to culinary art, we must be transparent, we must collaborate, we must trust one another. This will not just be about me or my ideas, it's about all of us." The undertaking felt monumental, and yet his spirit swelled with determination. It dawned on him that the journey to manifest genuine collaboration would require not just boldness, but vulnerability. He would have to expose his imperfections, give room for others to outshine him at times, and ultimately build something greater than his solitary aspirations. As the meeting wrapped up, David felt a strange blend of exhilaration and anxiety. The step forward would not only gauge their commitment, but also test his ability to amalgamate vulnerability with leadership. Would he dare to be transparent and invite accountability, or would the expectations become unmanageable? That night, deep in thought, David understood he stood on the precipice of profound transformation. Would he seize this opportunity to reinforce a culture of collaboration, or would fear of failure push him back into retreat? His heart raced at the possibilities. The answers awaited him, but only if he was willing to steer through uncertainty, to embrace both triumph and missteps alike. Tomorrow would unveil whether his newfound confidence could withstand the pressures of implementation. David took a deep breath, acknowledging the journey still ahead. The moment of truth was fast approaching, and he was determined not to shy away from it. Would he rise to the occasion, or would the shadows of self-doubt engulf him once more? David's anticipation for the day coalesced into a mixture of excitement and dread as he stepped into the meeting room, crossing the threshold between his conceptual world and the tangible struggles that awaited him. The board members took their places around the table, each face a canvas of expectation and skepticism. This was not merely a meeting, it was the moment he had envisioned for weeks, yet the very thought clawed at his composure. As he glanced at his colleagues, he felt a swell of responsibility. They weren't just faces. They represented years of artistry, dedication, and unheralded dreams that had, until now, been restrained by fear of innovation. He breathed deeply, reminding himself of the shift he wanted to inspire. "All right, today we're rewriting the script," he thought. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice steady despite the thunder in his chest. "What we're proposing today isn't just a culinary strategy, it's a paradigm shift in how we operate. We'll weave the stories of our local farmers into our menus, creating a tapestry of flavor shaped by the hands that cultivate it." The murmurs around the table were a blend of curiosity and caution. He could almost sense the measured responses behind impassive facades. A bold idea can provoke either fear or excitement. He hoped he presented it compellingly enough to ignite enthusiasm rather than shrink it to indifference. As David laid out his strategies and frameworks, highlighting each dish's potential to connect diners with local producers, he watched some nod thoughtfully, while others folded their arms, faces tight with concern. The divergence of opinion was palpable, infusing the air with urgency and tension. "You've mentioned stories, David," interjected Mark, an influential old guard in the culinary world. "But let's be honest, how do you expect to market this? Diners care about taste, first and foremost. Can we promise they won't be disappointed? What if this narrative approach flops in the tasting room?" The question struck like a lightning bolt, summoning the specters of his own self-doubt, but it also sparked a fire within him. "That's the risk of innovation," David replied, a newfound assertiveness sharpening his words. "We can't just rely on tried-and-true formulas when there's a world of storytelling waiting to be explored. This isn't just about flavor, it's about creating an emotional experience. If we don't take risks, we remain stagnant." Some of his colleagues exchanged glances, the weight of his words creating an unspoken dialogue about their own aspirations. What he felt fading from their faces was the notion of failure. He was testing the boundaries, yes, but he also was calling forth their own hidden ambitions. As the discussion progressed, David encouraged contributions and pushed the narrative enveloping each dish, unveiling not just flavors, but personalities behind every ingredient. This wasn't his vision alone. This was a collaborative agenda, inviting them all to sculpt their narratives into the fabric of the restaurant's identity. However, amid the discourse, he noticed tensions rising. The older chefs battled against the younger voices emerging with fresh ideas. At one point, Jenna, a passionate sous chef, passionately argued for a more adventurous interpretation of local cuisine, while another chef took a more conservative stance, insisting on proven recipes. David plunged into the fray, mediating debates and steering discussions that felt electric with possibility. Yet within him churned an internal monologue. Was he becoming a divisive force rather than a unifier? He recognized the possibility of fracture beneath the guise of collaboration. Collaborating is not merely about having ideas, he posited, addressing the fissures openly. It's about understanding the value in opposing views. We must blend tradition with creativity. It might be uncomfortable, but that's how we'll evolve. In the final moments of the meeting, a tentative agreement emerged. Each dish would feature the personal stories of artisans, framed with the wisdom of experienced chefs. The compromise felt like a patch on a wound, but he realized it was essential to foster unity around a single goal. As he stepped away from the table, a rush of satisfaction surged through him. Yet shadows of doubt still clung to the edges of his confidence. Having navigated the hurdles of collaboration didn't guarantee success. Merely breaking the ice didn't solidify trust. As he left the room, David pondered the questions left unanswered. Would their newfound willingness to share stories translate into active participation in their venture? Would the collaborative framework hold against the weight of their individual struggles? He sat at his desk, fingers poised above the keyboard, already drafting the narratives that would need to complement the dishes. But brewing within him, a new anxiety emerged. What lay ahead in the next chapter of their united venture? The pressure to execute weighed heavily. He sensed their fragile accord was only the beginning of a far more intricate journey. As he gazed outside at the wavering branches in the wind, determination once again fought against uncertainty. Would he press further into collective authenticity, or risk losing the very essence he sought to cultivate? He could feel the whispers of fate beckoning, teasing him into the uncertain depths. David's thoughts oscillated as he left the meeting room, the weight of his recent success teetering on the precipice of impending doubt. He had sparked conversation. He had engaged his team in rewriting their culinary narrative. Yet, in the quiet of his office, he was alone with his thoughts, and the specter of uncertainty loomed larger than before. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden hues through the window, David wrestled with the contours of the next phase. He realized that while he had ignited passion, there still remained a gulf to bridge between ideas and execution. Writing narratives for each dish felt monumental. He imagined the stories he wanted to tell, but even now he felt distanced from their true resonance. Did he genuinely understand the essence of the local farmers he intended to feature? It was not enough to simply share their names. Their spirits and labor needed to be interwoven into every recipe. Feeling the pressure of expectation tighten around his chest, David stood abruptly and strode over to the small bulletin board cluttered with photographs from past culinary events. Each image reminded him of a moment, a connection he'd forged over food. There was Jenna, bright-eyed and passionate, stirring a passion fruit puree at one of the earlier workshops. It was a fleeting moment of creativity birthed from collaboration. He had to channel that enthusiasm, harness it to create an authentic menu that celebrated the community they were a part of. He took a deep breath, the challenge crystallizing into clarity. He needed to go beyond desk research. David picked up his phone, his fingers hovering over the speed dial for Jenna. The thought of tapping into her youthful exuberance felt refreshing. Maybe her perspective could help him bridge other gaps. As the call connected, he felt a flicker of hope. "Hi, Jenna, I'm thinking. We need to hit the ground running. How do you feel about visiting some of these farms with me? The stories we forge can't just come from books, they must be lived," he said, conviction seeping into his words. "Absolutely, count me in," she replied, her eagerness palpable even through the line. After hanging up, David felt a surge of warmth amidst the impending chill of uncertainty. He had taken a step, a risk perhaps, but one that could redefine his leadership. He was no longer just a detached visionary. Now he was part of the narrative that he wanted to share. The journey ahead would demand immersion and openness, but it also promised growth, both personal and professional. He mapped out a plan for the following day, considering not only the itinerary, but how to connect each story to a dish. The thoughts of community, flavor, and intimacy began to flow. They would listen to the farmers, absorb their histories, and capture the textures of their lives. Each interaction would shape the narrative, turning perception into palpability. With a newfound focus, David became immersed in the details of the menu. Just then, a gentle knock brought him back. It was Mark, the influential board member whose skepticism earlier that day weighed on David like a leaden weight. "Mind if I join you for a moment?" Mark asked, hesitating at the threshold. David steadied himself, ready to confront whatever doubts Mark might bring. "Sure, let's talk." The ensuing conversation weaved through delicate edges of creativity and tradition, navigating the tension that had flared earlier that day. Yet, with each exchange, David felt a shift, a slight thawing of the ice where rigid opposition had once reigned. They spent hours debating flavors and stories, each actively refining their perspectives. Mark's intelligence blended well with David's visionary spirit, and it seemed they were crafting an intriguing narrative together. As the discussion progressed, David's heart raced. He was not merely defending his vision, but rather solidifying it with collaborative effort. This was real synergy. However, an undercurrent of uncertainty swirled in his mind. Would Mark fully buy into their vision? Was this partnership merely a respite from skepticism, or the true foundation for collaboration? As the night wore on and the lessons began to crystallize, David realized that the realization of his dream depended on more than just words. It called for courage, his own, and that of his colleagues. He needed to convince them that the path forward had to be walked together, despite apprehensions. The first light of morning broke as he contemplated the next steps. Small victories were within reach, but with them came deeper challenges. He determined to dive into the unknown, feeling the relentless weight of doubt push against his purpose. Just before he stepped out, a peculiar notion danced across his mind. If he dared to confront the entire team, facing them not just with the menu, but with his own fears, could that foster boldness amongst them? David stepped outside, that familiar wind rustling through the trees, as a new resolve solidified in his heart. Tomorrow's meeting would be different. It would be about vulnerability, honesty, and clarity. He pondered the importance of this journey ahead, both for himself and the team. "Time to face the music," he whispered to himself. And with that, he couldn't shake the reminder of the immense weight that lay ahead. Would the team step up to this challenge or unravel under the depth of vulnerability he intended to share? David stood at the helm of the once stagnant culinary initiative, where uncertainty had turned into recognition of purpose. Having spent hours refining their sustainable menu, enriched by the stories of local farmers, he sensed the team's collective investment. Tomorrow was the day for a significant meeting, and he fully embraced the shift from confrontation to connection. In the quiet morning hours, he prepared himself, recalling the fears that had once paralyzed him. The transition from an anxious entrepreneur to a confident leader was underway. David moved through the sunlit space of the kitchen, touching surfaces that had once appeared cold, but now vibrated with promise. Underneath the routine ingredients, he saw opportunity. Opportunity that represented both James and Jenna, the people behind the dishes, living stories waiting to be told. His previous discussions with the board reverberated in his mind. Vulnerability wasn't just a method to bring down walls, it could galvanize action. To achieve genuine collaboration, he needed to lead from a place of honesty, confronting not only the resistance, but also his own insecurities. "I have a vision," he thought, focused on articulating a future that crossed beyond traditional frameworks, one driven by understanding and metamorphosis. They need to feel the mission. They need to engage. As the clock edged closer to the meeting, David gathered his notes. His strategy would no longer rest solely on the merits of their culinary approach. It would also embody the spirit of the team unified in pushing conventions. He would invite his colleagues not only to witness, but to participate. The meeting commenced. The board members filed into the room, their expressions reflecting the skepticism that had become familiar. David began, laying out not just the science, but the emotional connection, the importance of weaving human experience into their culinary tapestry. The slides projected images of dishes alongside their stories, each node intertwined with identity, ambition, and hope. But this time, it wasn't just words. "I want us to embrace imperfection," David declared, looking around at his gathered peers. "We all have stories of struggle. What if we shine a light on those without fear? What if vulnerability became our strength?" The room filled with a charged silence that felt simultaneously heavy and liberating. David pressed on, sharing his personal awakening, the encounter with Maria, the maid, how her story redirected him toward this very mission. "This isn't just food," he passionately conveyed. "It's a lifeline, a space where we honor the narratives that feed our community." From the fringes of his team, Jenna's hand shot up, her passion effervescent. "I believe we can break barriers through narration. Let's bring the farmers here, invite them to share their tales at the tasting sessions. It's not just on the plate, it's personal." David's heart raced. She embodied the shift he was yearning for. Each of them must contribute, must own this collective mission. He felt the mount of tension quiver delicately. Curiosity and openness had replaced indifference. The board finally began to lean in. Mark, who earlier doubted David's vision, offered supportive nods amid the discussions. "Bringing the farmers in not only humanizes our menu, but also brings authenticity. It connects our diners to the roots of their sustenance." They discussed logistics, ideas flowed freely, and in moments David felt applause stir within him. The dynamic had shifted, igniting a passion that rippled through the room. Together they were crafting a new narrative. Each critique morphed into a pathway for enhancement, where raw ideas found fertile ground, evolving in real time. After 2 hours of passionate dialogue, David felt an ache in his throat, remnants of uncertainty dissolving as tangible affirmations built around him. Towards the close, he presented them with the first tasting opportunity, a curated experience that highlighted the farmer-chef collaboration. "This will not only be our showcase, but a bold commitment to sustain this project." "A bold step," the chairperson remarked, contemplatively eyeing David. "Innovation must be met with accountability." "I like where this is heading, but are you prepared for courting feedback even when it challenges your integrity?" David's heart swelled. This was not mere skepticism. It was a test of what he had cultivated. "Absolutely," he replied, the conviction in his voice unmistakable. "Critique is how we evolve. I'm ready to stand with each of you in this journey, open to every insight, because together we can move past this threshold of convention." Cheers erupted. Affirmations met his ears from across the boardroom. In that very moment, discomfort transformed into solidarity. He exited the meeting, overwhelmed yet transcendent. David understood he had crossed a vital bridge. Not only had he opened pathways for his vision to flourish, but he had also cultivated newfound camaraderie. He not only believed in what they were creating, but he also felt the authenticity enriching his very essence, a legacy conjured from hope, empathy, and shared purpose. As day faded into dusk, David pondered not what they had constructed today, but what lay ahead. Each battle held a lesson, each setback an avenue of growth. When the time came to face scrutiny, he felt a surge of assurance. He was no longer just a billionaire chasing profits. He had transformed into a vanguard of change. "This is it," David whispered to himself, staring into the horizon where darkness met dawn. Tonight, a new chapter unfolds, not just for me, but for all those whose stories can finally shine through. It was a moment of reflection, a completion of an inner quest that catalyzed purpose-laden aspirations. David's journey had evolved from personal gain into a collective embrace of shared humanity. But this was just the beginning. The full manifestation of his renewed commitment lay ahead, waiting to be brought to life. Now more than ever, support rippled and bubbled like fresh dough. His stories would interlace through plates and impart the taste of resilience. And that was his triumph. You need to subscribe now to this channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover these journeys. Comment below your reactions and theories about this ending. Share your thoughts. Don't wait even one more second. Share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Your support is crucial to inspire more transformative stories just like this one.